was a dust-up involving yours truly and presidential contender Donald Trump. Mr. Trump was upset with a question I asked him at the debate last week about his electability, and specifically comments he has made in the past about women. A few words on that. Apparently, Mr. Trump thought the question I asked was unfair and felt I was attacking him. I felt he was asked a tough but fair question. We agreed to disagree. Mr. Trump did interviews over the weekend that attacked me personally. I've decided not to respond. Trump, who is the frontrunner, will not apologize. And I certainly will not apologize for doing good journalism. This is a tough business, and it's time now to move forward.
All right, let's move forward. Jennifer Rubin, Washington Post columnist, author of the Right Turn blog at the Washington Post, and we are joined by her. And Jennifer, you have an opinion on the feud, and also on why this hasn't escalated. I mean, it turns out that they say Roger Ailes reached out to Trump and they smoothed things over, and then lo and behold, last night Megyn Kelly says this as opposed to ratcheting it up a notch.
Yeah, I think it's a mutual need here. Fox got huge ratings, the biggest ratings, I think, in the history of cable news, or cable period. So Trump is a godsend for them, and Trump needs to be shown on TV if he really wants to continue this campaign. So, you know, I think they figured out that they need one another, put it that way. I think Trump, however, as a serious candidate, is already on the decline. You see that in polls today from Iowa and from New Hampshire. And he's an entertaining guy for some people, I suppose, but he's not a serious contender for president. And I think as we get closer to the first votes being cast, and as voters, frankly, get to see some of these other candidates who are really good, who they have not yet been exposed to, Carly Fiorina being among them, I think the polls are going to shift pretty dramatically. They've already begun to shift, and you're going to see his star fade.
But you say they've shifted. I mean, he's on top in polls in Iowa and New Hampshire today.
Yeah, but it's much lower than it was before, and you see the rise of these other candidates who I think
well, Jeb Bush has fallen to 7th place in one Iowa poll, and Trump has surpassed Walker in that poll.
Right. Well, you also look at the rise of Kasich. You look at the rise of Fiorina. You also look at the margin by which he's ahead, and you know, at one point Trump was in the high 20s in some of those states, and he's not there anymore. So I think as time goes on, you are going to see that leveling off. Rubio has had a mixed record on the polls, but he had a very good debate. So I think as these things wash out a little bit, listen, the Republican Party has never jumped off a cliff with a candidate like Donald Trump, and I don't expect them to do it this time around.
Well, you know, and of course the argument to that is some might say they jumped off a cliff with Bob Dole, they jumped off a cliff with John McCain, and they jumped off a cliff with Mitt Romney, people who did not energize the base, people who did not motivate people to come out and vote.
Yeah, these people came close. Donald Trump, you know, would lose by 20, 30 points in the general election. And the Republicans also, I think, appreciate that this is a very serious time in our history. We've got Iran, we've got an economy that is faltering, and they need a serious person who's actually going to be able to do the job and not going to simply put on this show every day.
Well, let's talk about Iran. I've had two guests preceding you. One was Congressman Louis Gohmert, and then Andy McCarthy agreed with what he said, and that is that the Senate needs to state that they consider this Iran deal a treaty and reclassify it in that vein and go from there. Andy McCarthy said he believes the Senate rules would permit that and let them walk into these uncharted waters, you know, changing, just ignoring the amendment that they passed, the Corker Amendment. What do you say?
Well, I think that's a legalistic argument. It's not a practical argument for two reasons. One, the president is simply going to go ahead with it. And secondly, under current law, he has the right to use executive waivers to release the sanctions. What the Corker-Menendez bill did was claw back a little bit of power for Congress. Without this, they'd have no say whatsoever. The American sanctions would be lifted by executive order. The international sanctions are already on their way out because of the UN. So that's not a very practical response. It might be a legalistic argument, but if we're looking to actually stop this or slow this down, it won't help.
But if they called it a treaty from the beginning and never passed the Corker Amendment and said this is a treaty, Couldn't they?
Gone ahead and he would have enacted it. It doesn't matter what we call it. It matters what the president wants to call it. He would simply lift under current law the sanctions in place. He has executive authority and would have gone forward with this deal as an executive agreement.
All right, Jennifer, I appreciate it. Always great to talk to you. Thank you very much.
You too. Good to see you.
Jennifer Rubin, ladies and gentlemen. All right, folks, Give Me Five is next. But first, as Donald Trump continues to stay on top in the polls and dominate the debate, so does the popularity of his cap. The Donald has made it famous at campaign stops. It says, "Make America Great Again." You can get your very own Make America Great cap, a $25 value free with this offer. Just pay shipping and handling. Go to newsmax.com/TrumpCap or call 800-485-4350. That's newsmax.com/TrumpCap. Get your cap today and then take a selfie.